Okay, so it's 5:35. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first thing would be, well, first off, I think Sherry is probably going to join us. She's probably just running a little bit late. First thing would be citizen statements and petitions. Chris, I'm only seeing 5, so I'm thinking there's nobody else online with us.
No.
Okay, so we'll see if anybody comes, then they'll have a chance, excuse me, to talk later in the meeting. So moving right along. So report from the Friends of Bloomfield Public Libraries. Penny.
Hello. I just have one very quick item, and that's that we're pleased to provide funding, be providing funding for the BPL-sponsored Juneteenth concert on June 22nd, which is also the kickoff for the summer reading program. So we're excited about that and excited to be hearing more soon about other programs and activities of the summer reading season. That's it.
I know you say that's it, but that's huge. I love summer reading, and what a brilliant way to kick that off. That's great. Thank you so much, Penny.
You're welcome.
Of course, thank you to all the friends, for making this possible. It's excellent. Okay, chairperson's report. First and foremost, as always, a huge thank you to Chris for managing the tech as well as taking the minutes. And also thank you, Chris, for suggesting we try the focus mode for the hybrid environment.
Let's see.
So far, it doesn't seem to be zooming in, but we'll see as somebody talks. It might have a delay, but it's great to to see that we can do that.
Do it during the director's report.
Okay. And I'd like to thank everyone on the staff who contributed to creating the annual report. I know that was a lot of people, but I also want to thank the entire staff for all of that work, the incredible work that underlies all of those statistics. And it represents excellence in service to all of our neighbors, and that's the bottom line. So that annual report tells us that, and sometimes I think that might get lost in the translation. And speaking of the annual report, I thought that was really visually appealing, and it provides so much information. And getting that information out to everyone in Bloomfield is really incredibly important because it shows everything that's available at BPL. I did notice that the State of the Library presentation has had more than 80 views since it first streamed, which is good. And I think when the annual report is distributed in print, that will no doubt be helpful to a lot of Bloomfield residents as well. So that's really excellent. I wanted to mention to the board, since the last part of this just happened recently, I submitted testimony for 2 legislative hearings on behalf of the board in support of SB 148 and HB 5312. If anybody wants to text, I'll send you a link to the bills. Both of the hearings concerned reasonable regulation of the ebook pricing in Connecticut, which is completely unreasonable currently and very limiting, especially with budgets everywhere being pretty constrained. So hopefully our legislators were listening. I heard that the hearing went very long, that there was a lot of testimony, so that's good. And then tomorrow, there's a Connecticut State Library webinar, the Critical Partnership, Public Library Trustees and Directors. So I've registered for that, and I will go to that webinar. And they said they're recording it, so when the link becomes available, then I'll forward it to everybody, because I know having things kind of in the middle of the afternoon is certainly not convenient for most people. And that's it for me. So Elizabeth, director's report.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. And I wanted to start off with talking about Senate Bill 148 and Senate Bill 7. And I wanted to say thank you. We had 11 people from Bloomfield submit testimony, including board members and staff members. And again, that is an act making certain terms in electronic book and digital audiobook license agreements or contracts unenforceable. And that's simply to address the economics around it. And it's not a copyright issue. It's more of a contract issue. And we are very hopeful. And I think it's currently hoping to go to the Senate floor. So again, we are looking forward to seeing that passed this year. Senate Bill 7 is an act concerning Connecticut paid sick days. And that specifically has to do with the fact that in the original legislation about sick days, it includes the word librarian. So our part-time librarians who work enough hours get paid sick leave. But because it does not say the words library assistant, our library assistants who work right next to them do not get the same benefit. So we are really hoping that Senate Bill 7 also passes, which would force Bloomfield to allow our library assistants to get the same benefit that their colleagues that they work hand in hand with also get. This Thursday, the Connecticut Library Association is hosting a breakfast for legislators and librarians. I will be in attendance. I emailed Senator McCrory, Senator Slab, and Representative Gibson. Senator Slab already said that he hopes on being there, so I look forward to talking to him directly about these two bills. And again, I believe he's supportive of both of them, and I'm hoping all three of our legislators get on board with that. Every year, we are required by the Connecticut State Library to submit numbers that show the annual number of loans to non-residents, people outside of Bloomfield, who come to Bloomfield and borrow our books from our shelves. I want to say thank you for keeping track of these numbers. And I just want to recognize Councillor Cooper in the house. How are you doing, Councillor Cooper? And I'm going to give him an annual report.
Awesome.
He's featured in there. Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
Awesome, thank you. What are you guys doing?
We're good.
Yes, we
Yeah.
are in the.
Say hi to everybody.
Okay.
You're welcome to stay.
So please take a tour of the library, see everything. I know there's some staff that's probably still giving some updates about different things going on in the library right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And thank you for coming through.
Sure.
That's all good. So Dia keeps track of these numbers, and it's very interesting. So pre-COVID to now, we have different numbers for a lot of reasons, but just to give everybody an idea, in 2018 and 2019, 52,000 plus loans to people who are not Bloomfield residents. And then COVID hit and we went down to 21,000. And this in fiscal year 23, we're seeing those numbers inch back up, 25,529 items to non-Bloomfield residents borrowed in our facility. So it just gives another idea of how libraries contribute to economic development and how people from other communities come into our libraries and then do other things in Bloomfield. And when Prosser Library, McMahon-Whitberry libraries are done, I have no doubt that we are going to see those numbers more than double. And just to give everybody an idea, 25,000 items, non-Bloomfield residents. And I want to continue to talk to the library board and to the town council about libraries and economic development, because it's something we don't focus on a lot because we're really more about the service. But when you have excellent customer service and excellent libraries, there's just a lot of wonderful domino effects. And it's been shown in many studies that tax dollars spent by libraries go further than any other entity. And I think Bloomfield Public Library could show that over and over and over again. I now want to switch over into library building committee business. Currently, it's being discussed by certain members of the library building committee, to perhaps move us out, move BPL Atrium out at the end of the lease. The current lease ends September 1. After September 1, the current licensing agreement states that we would pay $16,000 a month. Currently, we're paying around $10,000 a month. However, moving out of the libraries would require us to put almost the entire library collection into storage, meaning Bloomfield residents would not have access to library materials until Prosser was done. That is anywhere from 6 to 8 months. That is not a temporary time. If you were to say 1 month, but this is 6 to 8 months that Bloomfield residents would not have access to library collections, or rather a very limited collection. And I know that before we had to pull back services for both homebound and notary services. If this move were to happen, we would have to reduce much more than just that. So right now, I know that the library building committee presented in front of the governance committee last Monday night, and I know that the cost analysis was asked for, and I know that the library board had also asked for a cost analysis, and we are working to get those numbers together and present them to the library board for further consideration. I was able to look up the numbers for when Meyer, who is the professional moving company that moved our libraries out of Prosser and McMahon and into the atrium, and that was done in a very organized, systematic fashion. So library staff had nothing to do with putting the collections into boxes. That was all done by Meyer, and the way they are organized is reflective of how they will someday go back on Prosser shelves. So it would require, if we were to do this double move, meaning moving out of the atrium, putting things into storage, and then when Prosser is done, taking things out of storage and putting them into Prosser, there would be a significant cost there. I know that when we moved out of the libraries, it cost $53,000, just to give everybody an idea of numbers here. The one big cost that is not being discussed is the cost of relocating a library for both the public and the staff. It's an incredible amount of work, professional library work, to make plans and then to see those plans through, to move collections, to know the shelving, the linear feet of shelving and where they're going to go. Is it teen? Is it youth? Is it middle grade? Is it adult? Is it large print? Is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? Is it graphics? It's much more complex than people may imagine. And I want to really make sure that we get that point across. And when I was looking up Meyer's website, it was interesting to note how they talk about this. Specifically, relocating a library is a significant undertaking, but with Meyer by your side, it becomes a manageable and stress-free process. Our goal is simple: to provide unparalleled library relocation services that prioritize the safety, integrity, and accessibility of your collection. And that also includes making sure that library collections are put into a climate-controlled environment and that we're able to find them when we get them, because otherwise we're just going to have a million boxes, and it's going to add a degree of complexity that has great cost if this is not done correctly. Okay. I wanted to also share with the board that we may have a new town manager. Library staff was involved in the town manager process. Allison, Carol, and I were able to meet with each candidate and ask them a series of questions, starting with, do you have a library card, and moving on from there. It was really informative, and we left feeling very good about the situation, and that one of those candidates absolutely will be able to hit the ground running. And I'm really looking forward to the announcement, and I'm hoping that the town manager can start as soon as possible. I wanted to also note, libraries also make sure that people have access to voter registration, and early voting is coming. It's going to be March 26, 27, 28, and 30 from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. March 25th is the deadline for unaffiliated voters who want to vote during the early voting period to enroll in a party. If you're not in a party, you cannot vote. And we will have that information at the library, and we'll be sharing that on our website and via our social media pages. As of about 2 hours ago, the librarian 3 position was listed. That is a youth and family services position. It is a high-level position, and we are very certain that we're going to get some really qualified candidates. We cannot wait. We're very excited to get that ball rolling. And we will be sharing that again in our newsletter on our website. And I know the town website also already has it listed. Please spread the word. Our homebound service is, I know the Lions are getting ready to move forward where they're going to be doing homebound deliveries on Fridays, and we're hoping to get that hitting go as of the end of this month. So to all of our homebound patrons, thank you so much for being patient with us as we work through this, but we are excited to get that started again. I was in Stamford a couple weeks ago with libraries from around the state, library workers from around the state. With every library, it was quite excellent, talking about how to better advocate for libraries when it comes to ebooks and all of these other issues, specifically around funding and book bannings. So we are becoming more and more organized as a state when it comes to that. Also, the biggest news, though, is the completion of our annual report. The annual report is 24 pages long. It covers a whole breadth of activities that we had done in fiscal year 23. To be clear, everything that we did was based off of our strategic plan and our mission statement and social mission, our social justice mission statement. I'm very proud of this work. I invite the public to check it out, to get a look right when you open it. It gives you some snapshot numbers. For instance, in fiscal year 23, we had 88,000 library visits. We had over 8,000 library card holders, which is a 7% increase from the year prior. 133,000 plus items circulated. Our library board is prominently shown. And again, our public, we invite you to share feedback with both library staff and the library board about your library. And if you think how you think we're doing, what we're doing great, what we could improve upon. Our strategic plan is featured. We highlight the Friends of the Library and everything they have done to help fund us, specifically around our biggest request, which is summer reading. We have highlights from our farewell parties from McMahon Wittenberry Library and Prosser Library. We have pictures of the new Prosser displayed. We show off how we have responded to the digital divide, adult program highlights, teen services, youth services are highlighted. Our first ever BookCon event, some of the young authors that came, including Bloomfield's own young authors, Jonathan Axelrod and Kamar Lee Henry. We highlight our long list of community partners. We have over 50 community partners. Thank you. We highlight some of our new collections. We also, one of the things I'm most proud of is our staff leading by example and presenting at multiple conferences and leading multiple roundtables, including the Social Justice Roundtable, the Adult Programming Roundtable for the state of Connecticut, presenting at conferences, Allison here being one of the graduates from the New England Library Association Emerging Leaders Program, presenting at conferences. It's all highlighted there, including Chris and Quincy of the CEN conference. Our entire team is listed. We have some feedback from the community, covers the full gamut, and then on the back page, where to find us now. So we will be going hard with this. We'll be sharing this with many stakeholders, every library board person, every town councilor, and then other key members in our community will also be sending out an e-blast to our community partners, thanking them for being part of our story and inviting them to continue to be part of our story, because we know when our libraries are finished, we're going to really appreciate their help getting word out to the community about how library cards are free for all from birth. I think that's it. Thank you.
I have one question.
Yes.
How long would the library have to be closed if we loved it?
If we moved from BPL Atrium to McMahon Wittenberry Library, it would be at least 1 month, at least.
How long were we closed last month?
Well, there were extended living circumstances.
Oh, minus the building officials.
Yeah, so,
And this is what we've learned. So even if we say approximately 1 month, we have been shown time and time again, any estimate of time is longer than what you think it's going to be. So my upfront estimate would be a month of library services being down.
And a quick question, and so that's all library services down.
Except for BPL online. Our website.
Okay.
Have everything and the computers and.
330 Park, we would probably be able to maintain services at 330 Park. We have not spoken to our colleagues though at 330 Park yet about that.
And what's the general like size difference, collection difference between what we're able to house at the atrium and what we're able to house at 330 Park?
That is a great question, Erin. So when you come to BPL Atrium, the public floor where the public can use the library space, that is 10,000 square feet. McMahon Wittenberry is less than 6,000 square feet. Oh, go ahead, Penny.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just reacting. I thought the entire space at the atrium was 10,000 and that included all the storage space. And that the
it's 20,000.
the
20,000.
actual, it's 20,000? Okay.
Yeah,
So half
That's what-
of the space at the atrium is currently being used for,
right, exactly, yeah. And then in the office, yeah, that was always my understanding.
Yes, so 10,000 feet is not, well, it is actually part of that 10,000 square feet is being used because we have the computer carols and staff being using it, but just the public space where the stacks are is 10,000 square feet.
So to shut down the atrium for really any amount of time just severely impacts our capacity to provide top level quality library services to the town.
Yes. And we would not, so the entire Prosser collection is currently in boxes. The majority of the Prosser collection is in boxes at the atrium right now. So that would all have to be moved into storage. And then the current collection that's out to the public, we would not be able to fit that all into McMahon. And so we'd have to figure out something there of how much, what we would put in storage and what would be put out. And then to complicate this even further, the current plan by some on the library building committee is to have staff there as well. So space that would be that will one day be for the public would actually have to be used by staff in that interim period until Prosser Library is complete, which could be as soon as April 2025.
I like how you say as soon as, and then proceed to give a date over a year in advance. So is there, I'm sorry, and if we need to, move on the agenda, please let me know. And Elizabeth, I can circle back with you and ask any questions that I might have. So it sounds just from the conversation that we have had thus far that moving out of the atrium is just not wise. It's not wise from just a staffing perspective, a collection perspective, the perspective of being able to have the space and room for the public to come in and utilize the library services in the way that they have been accustomed to using the library services in this town thus far. Has anyone from the library building committee like been in these spaces that they are talking about moving collections and people into. It seemed, I'm very befuddled actually by the desire to shift out of the atrium, especially if there's not like a substantial cost savings that we can demonstrate, that would either compensate for, or, it just does not seem like a good idea to me if we want to maintain services.
The charge to the building committee said to build the building with an eye to service. Currently, what we keep hearing from LBC is, well, the plan was always to move back to McMahon-Wittenberry for a period of time until Prosser was completed. And that's true if you don't know the background numbers. The McMahon we would have been moving to was the McMahon that would have been completely renovated and expanded with an addition. So the extra 3,000 plus feet from the addition won't be there. The building is not being completely renovated. It's being refreshed. Because ADA compliance will now actually happen, and that is a good thing. I'm not complaining about that. It should always have been there, and that's another story. Now, McMahon-Wittenberry will be under 6,000 usable square feet. So we're moving to a building that is significantly smaller than the building that was originally planned. So just equating that with the old plan is not actually even. Plus, in the original plan, we were talking about a few months, not a very long time. And it's disheartening, to put it mildly. Libraries are service organizations. Service is the whole point of us being there. So being unable to provide even basic services, no service for at least a month, and that is a cheerful estimate. We thought we would be down for a very short period of time when we moved to the atrium, and it turned out that was not the case. We don't know how that will work moving back to McMahon-Wittenberry. There are so many things that affect this. Currently, town employees are not allowed to work from home. Much of what we could do for some functions that are not necessarily forward-facing could be done at home, but that would require a change. Apparently, there is no policy, so it has not been allowed. So we either need an interpretation that because there's no policy, we should be able to do it, or that a policy is passed, but we don't control that. And there are possibilities that we've heard floating around that the LBC is thinking of using a different mover to save money. And I can tell you, as someone who has been through a library move with a mover who is not experienced and does not understand libraries and how that works, it is disastrous to do that. After the move that I was involved in, our entire opening was seriously delayed. It made a huge difference in our ability to provide service because the movers were incompetent. And we wound up reshelving the entire collection after they had I can't even discuss that years later without feeling ill. Meanwhile, everyone who was ready to use this library was marking time. We could not provide service because we were shelving thousands and thousands of books. Elizabeth mentioned voter registration and how we're about to engage in that. This fall is a hugely important election. It is a national election. Not only is it important on a philosophical level, in Connecticut, libraries are required to assist with voter registration. Where will we do that? People must be able to come to us to provide that if we have a library that's open. What do we do about that? We can't not be in compliance with state statute. We don't want to be either because we want to be there for people. All of these details are things that thus far either haven't been discussed or seem to suffer from a somewhat cheerful interpretation of how this would work. Our entire focus is that we serve everyone in Bloomfield and people beyond Bloomfield, but particularly every person in this town. This sets us up for a situation where we can't do that. Where taxpayers have already come to meetings and said, we paid for these materials. If nothing else, we have the right to be able to use them. And you're telling us that we could go 4, 5, 6, 8 months, heaven knows how many months, and they're in storage, and there's no plan for that. So we are beyond frustrated, and we have not seemed to be able to break through and make this point. So I will get off my hobby horse, but I understand exactly what you're asking here. I absolutely agree with you. Come to the LVC meetings and
Yeah.
ask, please. There is one tomorrow night.
Okay.
If you register, there is public comment. It is limited to 3 minutes per person. We're kind of loosey-goosey with that. They are not. So we need more voices saying, wait a minute, how do we provide service? Because I was a librarian for decades on end. Elizabeth, all of her leadership team are librarians. We're giving our best professional advice. And that does not seem to be sufficient. And we do not yet have a cost analysis from the LVC. Counselor Cooper asked for that at that same meeting that Elizabeth discussed. The cost of additional moving, the cost of additional storage, all of those things aren't anything that's been represented in the estimates. It's only, we could save this much on the atrium. But what are we spending in costs that will occur? We're hearing various stories about self-storage. So yeah, library materials cannot go in a self-storage bin. Library materials absolutely require environmental controls. The climate has to be perfect. Or we would get to the end of this period and have to tell the taxpayers in this town that they paid who knows how much money for this collection and it's been destroyed. We also have historical documents that are stored. They cannot survive a self-storage bin. So, and that hasn't even been discussed with us. So I'll just reiterate, please come to tomorrow night's meeting. We need voices. So, Elizabeth, I'm sorry, was that the end of your report? Did anyone
Yes.
else want to comment or ask? I'm sorry, Erin, are you set?
Yeah,
I didn't cut you off.
I mean, I have a ton of other questions, but I can circle back, Ava, with you and Elizabeth and,
Sure.
you know, and ask them offline. That's totally fine.
Okay. But don't, I heard your initial hesitation. I want everybody to talk, you know, not just me. God knows I would, but I want everyone to participate and to get your questions out. And if we don't have answers, we'll say so. If we have answers, we'll provide them. So,
Thank you.
okay. Did anyone else want to ask a question? Somebody's hand is up. Is that you, Claudia?
Yeah, yes. Thanks. Had 2 brief questions. Well, first of all, first thing is the question's a point. I think whenever we mention the word storage, we should say climate controlled storage every time. Because I think that people will go off on tangents of, oh, my barn's empty, you know, I could take, you know, whatever. I actually do have a barn. You would not want to store books in there, it's ruined. So I just, every time you say storage, say climate controlled storage. All right, that's my one point. The second point is, I'm not exactly sure, maybe I just didn't hear. Who is in charge of finding the estimates for moving climate controlled storage? Second, moving, because we're talking about 2 moves if we go to McMahon. You know, who makes those estimates?
So the first time around, it was not very clear. And what should have been a one-stop shopping ended up being many stops. This time around, we now have an owner's rep. And his name is Sean Vincent, and we actually have a meeting with him tomorrow to hopefully get some clarity and reach out directly to Meyer, who moved us last time, and get some of these questions answered so that we can get these numbers down on paper, because I think to Aaron's point of saying there should be a substantial cost savings needs to be demonstrated. I think when all of this is done, there's not going to be any cost savings. I think it's actually more expensive to move twice and store properly than to just stay here. But we'll be meeting with Mr. Vincent tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Can I just say, as to who is responsible for doing this, it's really who's willing to do this. Because we want to do this right. And so you're willing to go through all the steps, whereas the library building committee doesn't seem willing to do that. They just seem to kind of want to wing it. And that's not how you succeed.
I agree. It's just if they're going to talk numbers and budget, and we're going to talk service and philosophy, we're not communicating. So if we have numbers,
Right.
then we can have numbers.
And if they don't have numbers, then they'll have to trust our numbers, I guess.
Yeah.
Because they don't seem willing to come up with the numbers for this. Am I correct, or?
Yes, yes. And I think, you know, again, talking that language, talking to Meyer, we should have already reached out to Meyer. But we're going to go through the owner's rep and have them come forward with that. And also, I know that previously I mentioned that the current license agreement, we do not have a lease, it's a license, states that after September 1, it's $16,000 a month. That is without us talking and negotiating and seeing what we could do with that. So I'm hopeful that that conversation can also come forward, because one thing I did know that the chair of the library building committee said was that in the budget, there's 2 more months of money, which I'm not understanding, but if it's based off of that $16,000 number, that could be $32,000. And if we negotiated that, we're currently paying just over $10,000 a month. So that could be as much as 3 months right there. So I'm looking forward to exploring all these options further.
Okay. And I think it's critical to do that with the owner's rep, because that's what they're there for. They're experts in this, rather than just hearing various theories floating around or sort of anecdotal information. We need to have someone who's experienced at this and to find out. And if there haven't been conversations with the agents at the atrium, then that needs to occur. And we have a new town attorney who seems to be right on top of things. I'm sure that he and his staff would be more than capable of entering into those kinds of conversations on our behalf. If that hasn't happened yet, how do we know what the costs would be? And especially given that we're all hearing that people are moving out of the atrium, they might be very interested in maintaining at least some rent for a very large space as opposed to none. So yeah, we'll all be interested in hearing what you and Sean have discussed. And Claudia, I agree with your point. We do have to make an absolute point of saying climate controlled storage. Penny knows what I mean when I say this is not someone's breezeway where we drop off some boxes of books. It's different when you're putting the books out on a table and saying, hey, any book's a quarter. These are books that have to be, and not just books, but materials that have to be protected. Okay, are there any other questions or comments?
I do have one more question,
Good,
Ava.
go right ahead.
Just in term, has there been any conversation yet about potential messaging? So I always like to sort of think about multiple case scenarios. And worst case scenario, let's say we have to move out of the atrium and do all of these things that are bad for our collection, bad for our staff, bad for our services, and all of that. Is there a plan in place? I know there was a talk about a draft communication plan. Has there been any have there been any conversations about how this then gets messaged to the public? Around ultimately whose decision it was, whether or not and to what extent programs and services were taken into account in terms of making some of these decisions. Do we have a plan in place for that? Or again, actually, but my question was, have the conversations even like started to bubble up around that?
Not that I'm aware of. We have been asking questions. We are still pushing for the best possible solution. I have not heard anything about that yet. And I can tell you that we met for a very long time as an outreach committee before this move, longer than we have left. We had started working on it, so, but that's the purview, at least for the moment, of the library building committee. Elizabeth, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to respond to Aaron's question. So at the governance meeting last Monday night, Councilor McCleary asked those questions, specifically wanting to know if there would be, would there be cuts to service and how would this impact service? Because they did not want to have more cuts to service, similar what happened with when we had to cut notary services and homebound services. And it was interesting to me when I heard him say that, because the cuts to homebound and the notary was much less than what would have to happen if we did this. So I don't think council has a full understanding of just how much this would impact services, and how by making this decision, they are making decisions about services. So I know one of the questions that Councilor McCleary asked was, could cuts to service come to this committee? And the mayor said no, because that's out of their purview. So I'm curious as to the answers to those questions. That would probably be a town manager's office question, because I'm not sure who would be communicating that, like who made the decision to move out, who.
Okay.
And what they heard that night was, but it was always the plan to move back to McMahon. But that is not sufficient information
Correct.
for this decision.
Correct. Exactly. Especially given the caveats that you mentioned earlier, Ava.
And that's just a short list. It's a lot. And our motivation is solely to do our best for Bloomfield. So hopefully that will break through.
And my motivation is to retain staffing levels.
Yes.
And I'm very concerned about staff turnover as we're about to open 2 new libraries, and we're going to have people coming. We're going to have an increase in Bloomfield residents and from surrounding communities, and actually the entire state of Connecticut. When a new library is built, people come to see that library. And so we need to hit the ground running, and our staff is highly trained, and I want to maintain the excellent staff that we have. And this has been already a very hard process with the turnover, like finance directors, town managers, public work directors, IT directors. Every challenge that could be thrown at us has already been thrown at us. So my ask and request is that we try to make the trajectory of this, whenever we can, to include how this impacts staff in that as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, any further questions or discussion on this point? Okay, if not, we can move on to old business. Discussion of fiscal year 2025 budget. And Liz,
So,
I'll call on you for that, please.
so, we're about to have a new town manager start. And we are supposed to present our budget Tuesday night. Our budget is in, it's been in, and I'm curious what the new town manager is. Start date, everything is gonna be impacted by this, and I'm curious how this is all gonna play out. I'm also curious about, the too many balls in the air about the library and how that's the questions that are gonna come from all over the place with that. I'm looking forward and hoping and optimistic that this budget process moves forward in a good way, and we'll be there presenting and doing what we do. I'm happy the annual report is done again before that. And Tuesday night we will be at 3:30 Park presenting that budget. More details to come. I realize I haven't even sent an email to the library board about this really in detail, but the number one thing to know is our budget is essentially completely flat, minus the cost of living increases and the bumps that come from the HR end. Everything else is completely flat. The fact that we had the hiring freeze, however, makes it look not flat, because it wasn't a hiring freeze. They actually deducted that from our budget this fiscal year. So with that being put back in, it looks like a bump. It is not. And I want to make sure all the library board understands that, because it's not an increase.
Yep. And I don't have a sense of what's going on with the budget in general right now because of the switch. You know, we don't know when do we get, is there been an official announcement of any kind?
No. Beth has a question.
I just have a quick, why didn't you take it out? Are they worried you'd use it for something else?
I don't know why they took it out.
Okay.
We did not realize it until we started putting in our
Okay.
budget.
Okay, thank you.
We did not know that it wasn't really a freeze and that they actually removed it from our budget until we started putting in our budget numbers.
I've been through, I don't know how many budget freezes because I worked in schools for so long. And we used the same software. I don't understand that. I've never seen that before. That'll be an interesting conversation too. Okay, any further discussion or other questions? I will say, hopefully, everyone will have a chance to at least watch the presentation, whether in person or hopefully it will be available on Zoom again, like it was last year. Okay. If there's no further discussion or questions, is there any other old business to discuss? No, hearing none. Let's move on to new business. Discussion of McMahon-Wittenberry Library renovation plans. Elizabeth, are these the new plans that we heard about at LBC? Great.
Yes, so we have the updated plans that we've been working on with TSKP that were discussed at the library building committee meeting 2 weeks ago and will be discussed again tomorrow night. The plans, highlights of, oh yes, that would be great. Chris is going to try to bring it up on the screen. Highlights of the plan, which we are so pleased about, include a blast off teen space, which this was something we were thinking about actually we're moving the teen space completely because it just was not a big enough space. But now that we have this glassed off teen space, we really think the flow of this space will be much better and everybody will be able to be themselves. The teen can do their teen conversations, families can be there, and everyone will have their space. And I know the chair of the library building committee gave a list of the updates that will be included with McMahon, and I wanted to share that with the library board as well. New roofing, PV solar panels, a new rooftop HVAC unit, a new window wall, new entry canopy, new outdoor children's area garden space, EV charging station, new entry vestibules that are fully ADA compliant and handicap accessible, new renovated toilet rooms, again, fully ADA compliant, a new teen space with the glass, new ceilings, new lighting, new carpet, new wall finishes, new furniture, and all new technology. And again, Chris is just going to pull up, here's the floor plan. And you'll see that center piece, the centerpiece where you walk in from either the parking lot or the Bloomfield side, that's where the low ceiling is. And then you walk out to a high ceiling the top part is the adult section and the bottom part is the youth section. You see those squares, the two squares at the very top and the one at the bottom, those are going to actually be study pods. So we will still be able to accommodate tutoring sessions that happen there. And you'll see the computer areas in the business center. There's 8 computer terminals. We want to note that there's going to be a lot of technology, including laptops that people can borrow and then go wherever they want in the library. At the bottom, you'll see the children's spaces. The square for the teen spaces includes cafe seating that faces out, and that wall, which was once brick, is going to be fully glass. So that's also going to be including a lot of light from the outside. So the adult space and the youth space will both have those wonderful light-filled walls. We are finalizing some of the finishes in terms of color, but the youth space is going to have green be the dominant color and the adult space will have blue. There you see the full spectrum. The porcelain floor tile and the bathrooms are going to be beautiful. We're just really excited about this. The one thing to note that came up last week is that McMahon Whittenbury Library will no longer be LEED certified. So that's a bummer. But outside of that, we are very pleased with the current layout, considering the fact that we are unable to expand upon this location at this time. The other big pro is that we are still going to be able to get a lot of the collections in here. So the teen and youth collections are going to be fairly robust and almost comparable to what they were when we were going to have a larger library. It's the adult collection that's going to be cut back a bit. But we're working through some library services options that we hope will streamline the experience so that so the whole shelf experience will be improved upon and things like that.
Okay.
And again, they're currently hoping for this to be completed late summer, early fall. And this will be the topic of conversation tomorrow night at the library building committee meeting. And this is why we had the BPL Atrium open house today. It was to show off our spaces and our technology and everything we have going on here, but it was also to provide the public with an ability to look at this and provide some feedback. I've not been able to see the feedback yet. We currently have a library feedback form live on our website. So if anybody wants to provide feedback, they can. We are looking for feedback about our temporary spaces, as well as people's thoughts on the proposed plan for McMahon Whittenbury Library, and ways to improve the library experience while we're in our temporary location. So the BPL Atrium Open House today was very successful. We had a lot of people walk through. I don't have numbers yet. I will report to the board about that. But we had a lot of input and feedback, and it was great to hear from the public on this.
Great. At least looking at that plan, I really think TSKP has done quite a job trying to use a very much smaller space and squeeze out every square inch for use. And I'm sure they're frustrated as well. Questions, comments? Okay, I will say the same thing that I said before. It'll be discussed at that meeting tomorrow night. Please watch, or even better, attend, ask questions. Okay, if there's no discussion of that, I think we just covered both items of the new business. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay, does anyone have any additional new business to discuss? Some days that's a question where you ask saying, no, because we don't know how we would be able to answer. Okay, Chris, has anyone else joined us such that there might be a member of the public who would like to speak? No? Okay. Oh, my papers are sticking together. Okay, board comments. Would any trustee like to add any comments? No? Okay, hearing none. We can move on to approval of minutes of February 20th, 2024. Does anyone have any corrections or additions to the minutes of February 20th? No? Okay. Hearing none, do we have a motion to accept the minutes of February 20th, 2024 as submitted?
I so moved.
Okay, I'm not sure who I heard here.
Three of us.
I was one of the people. There may have been a couple of others.
Okay, you know what? I'm gonna leave it to you, Chris. Flip a quarter.
Go with Aaron and Claudia.
It's
Claudia.
Okay,
I'll be checking her. I can do it.
okay. So, all in favor of accepting the minutes as submitted? Please either
Aye.
raise your hand there or raise your hand here. Okay, so that's unanimous that we are accepting the minutes. Thank you. And of course, thank you, Chris. Anyone who's ever taken minutes is sitting here silently saying, oh, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Great.
Okay, if anyone has anything else they'd like to add, even though it's not quite in order, this is your last chance. Okay, if not, then always the most popular motion of the evening. Would someone like to move to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, was that Bev? Okay, do we have? a second?
Claudia and yeah.
And Claudia, okay. Unless there's dissent or further discussion on that, then we're adjourned.